If you have concerns about the direction that the world is headed and you want the chance to be a part of solving them in a creative, non-destructive way, then you owe it to yourself to look at crypto through that lens.
Look, let's be honest, the world needs this information right now. 9 series episode. It's been a real honor to be a part of this whole series, so thank you so much. And also, in the first 5 minutes, Michael, I knew I wanted to work with you. And I think I joked and said, Michael, this is the documentary I want to make, but I'm too busy. What I love about what you've done, Michael, is it's accessible to anybody. It's presented in a way where I think you can pull in everybody, from my 17-year-old daughter to my 70-year-old mother.
It was actually hard for us to cut it down to just 9 episodes. We had so much great footage. I mean, like there's the metaverse, there's DeFi, there's DAOs, there's NFTs, there's so many things that we wanted to dive into, and really with a goal being to educate and inspire people, both entrepreneurs and investors, to get into the space. It's important that you keep up with what's going on. Even if you're not putting a ton of money into this, if you keep up and understand where we're at today, over the next 5 years, you'll be prepared to take advantage of a lot of the opportunities that arise, and then get out there and talk. A lot about crypto is about the community, right? And that aspect of everyone should be able to present their ideas, and the best idea should win.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Michael Hearne, the entrepreneur, investor, and documentary filmmaker. You are the founder and CEO of Decentral Publishing, where you help share the hidden story of crypto and decentralized finance. Your upcoming documentary series, Uncensored Crypto, brings together over 50 of the leading experts in the industry to take a deep dive into the technology at the heart of the crypto movement, helping solve many of the issues we face as a society today. Over the course of 9 episodes, of which I am featured in 2, this documentary series examines the technological revolution taking place and explains how and why everybody can take advantage of this incredible moment in history. You have called cryptocurrency the biggest wealth-building opportunity of our lifetime and believe that nothing can stop the inevitable rise of decentralized finance. Michael, welcome to London Real.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Michael,
excited to be here.
It's great having you here. I'm so excited to speak with a fellow filmmaker and also go deep on this incredible series that you put together in record time. And look, let's be honest, the world needs this information right now. And you've gone deep into this 9 series episode. Again, I'm heavily featured throughout, and it's been a real honor to be a part of this whole series. So thank you so much. For anybody watching now, they can actually start watching this series immediately. If they go to londonreal.tv/uncensored, they'll go right to your landing page and they can start watching this thing, and you'll be dropping episodes over the next few days and weeks. And I'm telling you, it's a great way to start getting an education in this space. So Michael, super excited to have you here. We got time to talk about everything, but maybe I start off and talk about, how do you feel right now? I mean, you've just basically done a huge dive into this industry, spoken to 50 people in this space. Probably you got the best seat in the house when it comes to crypto and DeFi education. How are you feeling? What are some of the big moments that you had, the big realizations you had? And how do you feel right now that this thing's about to drop on the world?
It's an incredible feeling. I mean, to have gone from having the impulse and the idea, really like realizing the significance of what's happening in crypto, to being here within less than 8 months is just, I mean, it's been a wild ride. I feel very fulfilled right now. We're getting a lot of traction out there, and that's great. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want to spread the real story of what's going on with crypto, kind of beyond, the hype and the meme coins. Which again, I don't hate on meme coins and degens. They can play their way, but I wanted to talk about some of the bigger concepts. So, I mean, it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life, Brian. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I think we first maybe spoke 6 months ago, and I knew of your former experience in making some excellent documentary films like Money Revealed and others. And so, and also in the first 5 minutes, Michael, I knew I wanted to work with you. And I think I joked and said, Michael, this is the documentary I want to make, but I'm too busy. I'm here doing the 2 live episodes a week. I've graduated over 500 students from our DeFi Academy, and we just announced London Real Ventures. So we're actually taking, ownership stakes in some really exciting upcoming metaverse plays and DeFi protocols. And so, quite frankly, even though we've made 5 feature-length documentaries in the past, we don't have the bandwidth to do this. And so I'm a little jealous of you, but I also know how much hard work it does. But I'll say one final thing, Michael. This way of educating people through a documentary, it's so important. And podcasts are important, vlogs are important, but there's something about real storytelling like you're doing here that I think adds another educational layer. And I'm super excited for all the London Real people in the DeFi Academy to kind of get this knowledge kind of through you and through this docuseries. I guess I might start by asking, why 9 episodes? Why this much content? Why 50 people? I think you spent like probably over 100 hours interviewing people. Did it just feel like you couldn't do it any smaller, or why was it this big?
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, it covers such a broad category of topics. There's so many layers to what's going on, no pun intended. And so, 9 episodes is kind of the model that I was taught by former partners of mine, Jeff and Patrick, from Money Revealed days. And so I wanted to stick with something that I knew and I understood. But it was actually hard for us to cut it down to just 9 episodes because we had so much great footage. I mean, like there's the metaverse, there's DeFi, there's DAOs, there's NFTs, there's so many things that we wanted to dive into. And really with the goal being to like educate and inspire people, both entrepreneurs and investors, to get into the space. Like I just felt like we needed to really go deep into each of those areas without making it overwhelming, and to get those kind of really juicy 5 to 15 minute segments where it's just punch, it's in your face, powerful content. We needed all that footage. So,
Yeah, I like that 9 series. And each episode is how long, roughly?
90 to 120 minutes.
That's crazy. So you just basically made 9 movies, basically.
It sure feels like it.
That's like super impressive. And I want to talk about these episodes, but I also want to give people a little bit of a sneak peek. And so we're going to play a short 2-minute piece that kind of explores the opportunity that currently exists in the crypto and DeFi space. It does start with me, so maybe I'm a little biased, but I think it's a great piece. So we're going to play that right now for everybody. So enjoy. This is a small piece of this upcoming documentary. I think right now we're living through the largest adoption of technology that we will ever see in human history. We can all be a part of it, and we can all invest in it in the blockchain. I'm getting excited just talking about this.
Bitcoin is better than real estate, stocks, bonds, literally everything else you can think of. It's the alpha predator of store of value.
This has got to be the golden age for investors, period. Golden age.
We need to learn to communicate with people about this. Generally, when you talk about crypto, people just think about Bitcoin, Ethereum, meme coins and the dark web. They can't see how it can actually translate into social transformation.
You're going to see a tsunami of money flood from the traditional banking system and financial system into decentralized finance, and it has already begun.
Paul Tudor Jones, last year, he recommended asset managers to have a 2% allocation to Bitcoin. This year, he reiterated his stance, but doubled down, bumped it up to a 5% for asset managers to Bitcoin.
This is going to change the world. This is the new internet. There's another thing that I always told myself. If I find something as revolutionary as the internet, I will dedicate my life to it. And when I saw Ethereum, I thought, oh, this is it.
And that was just a little taste of Michael Hearne's handiwork here from this incredible new 9-part series coming out called Uncensored Crypto. Again, if you want to start watching this immediately, you can go to londonreal.tv/uncensored for free and start watching this content, and he's going to start dropping episodes. Michael, I want to let people know the names of the 9 episodes because it gives people an idea of how deep you go and how broad you go. And then I'd love to talk about some of these issues. So episode 1 is the crypto revolution. I think you really start off in a really broad basis. Episode 2 is Beyond Bitcoin, which is fascinating because you're going much deeper than kind of what most people know or used to know of crypto. Episode 3 is A New Internet, Web 3.0, which is a topic that we talk a lot about here on the show. Episode 4 is the Everything Revolution, which is very interesting to see how you pull all sorts of other pieces and issues and technology in. Episode 5, The Rise of DeFi, which I am featured in, where you go deep on the DeFi protocols. Episode 6, The Sovereign Individual, which is, again, a very powerful moment to talk about how this all relates to freedom and human rights. Episode 7, Crypto versus Fiat, something my students are asking me about every day, and we're talking about now in the mainstream press. Episode 8, The Dark Side of Crypto. This is interesting, and I'm really glad you acknowledged it. And then Episode 9, Crypto versus Climate, something that's constantly coming up in the discussions. You know, strangely enough, Michael, with a lot of the layer 1 protocols I'm speaking to lately, you know, they talk about the climate issues and being carbon neutral very early in the conversation, whether it's Tron or AVAX or a few of the others, Elron, they're all talking about that carbon neutral aspect. So, you know,
it's important.
That gives people a little taste of kind of, you know, what a lot of this content is starting on. Where's a good place to begin? Should we start at the beginning, or how do you start to talk about this film?
Right, that's the question, right? And definitely the question that we were asking in post-production. So we wanted people to start in the beginning. We wanted episode 1 to give a little bit of history and some of the fundamentals, like, you know, what is a blockchain, what is Bitcoin, and talk about, you know, some of the broader categories. And really, you know, what that means is episode 1 is like it gives you a warm up for all the things that are to follow, but it's kind of the micro condensed version because you've only got, you know, 2 hours. You have to break it up somehow. So that's what episode 1 is. So we started with, you know, Bitcoin being, you know, birthed around the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 timeframe, and you know why that's so significant. You know, as you know, as we and, you know, probably your viewers as well, but, you know, I don't think everybody knows, you know, just the way money is created is almost this, like when you explain it to people, they scratch their head because they can't like believe that's how it works. But I think that's becoming more common knowledge. And so contrasting that to Bitcoin, and, you know, that was where we started. So from there, you know, we just built, broadened the universe, you know, more and more until we felt like we'd given people a pretty good, you know, full spectrum.
Yeah, it's important to talk about, and a lot of people don't know it at first, is that Bitcoin was born, you know, in the 2008 financial crisis, and it was a part of, this fictional character, or who we think is real, of Satoshi Nakamoto and the myth and the legend, but it's not really written in the white paper, but it comes from a place of, wow, our money system is broken. And to have it in perspective is important as you go along. And then one of the things I've realized over the last 6-8 months, Michael, is that talking to people who look at the world through Bitcoin is the way that they can kind of see how inflation works. It's one of the reasons Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy decided that he wasn't being a fit CEO by having cash on his balance sheet. And he thought, well, what should I have on my balance sheet? Because my cash is basically growing at the rate of inflation of 34% a year if you look at where the stock market went up. And he said, I'm actually not, being fiduciary responsible if I'm doing this. And he thought gold, and then he found Bitcoin. And so I've also had Jeff Booth, who wrote a whole book about inflation and deflation. And he says, when you price everything in the future in Bitcoin, the prices of everything goes down. But when you price it in dollars, it goes up. So
exactly.
It's an amazing way to see the world. And I'm glad you started there because, I don't know if you're finding this, Michael, but, when you start talking to people about money, and so many people tune out. I think it's got to do with our education system that never acknowledged or even began to talk about money. And I think people just sometimes think they're not smart enough. They get frustrated. So you have to really start probably slow. And I guess that's what you were doing with the first part of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And really kind of on a broad perspective, I guess one way to think of it is, you've heard the analogy, we've all heard it, we're in the early 90s with internet companies. That's where we are with crypto companies, DAOs, whatever we call them these days. That's true, right? But I wanted people to understand, not necessarily like, oh, pick company X, pick company Y, here's your trading strategy, because that's not my background, that's not my expertise. I put people like that in front of the camera, so that's included in the series. But what I wanted people to see is sort of the big picture of why this stuff is inevitable. Because when you understand that the technology is so far superior than the existing solutions inside of a given area of our life, that the superior technology always wins in war, right? You got the bronze beats iron, or maybe that's vice versa. I don't know my history, but I should.
I always remind my students, especially when the markets are down, that this is, a technological revolution. It's also a complete shift in human paradigm. And both of those factors are 10x to 100x to 1,000x better than what the system has. So it's only a matter of time before it gets adopted. The great comparison is the internet. That was technology. It was actually quite decentralized technology, lucky enough. And it created this revolution. But I was in the dot-com boom. I was in New York City. I was the CFO of a startup, and we saw it go up and go down. But I've had Andreas Antonopoulos on the show, and he said, Brian, the year 2000 was the worst when it comes to asset value of technology, but it was one of the best years in technology because that year more people started using Amazon, more people started using email. So if you don't look at the market cap and you just look at the adoption, it just continued to rocket. So I always use that analogy with my students. But Bitcoin's down, so what? This tech is still being developed and it's still moving forward. And again, it's the fastest adoption of technology we've ever seen in our species. It's growing, according to Raoul Pal, at like 113% year on year, which is literally exponential growth. And
exactly.
It's something we're not used to. We don't even know how to process it. So sometimes you have to take a step back and just say, first principles, okay, we're not crazy. Let's just keep going.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I still, like when people are crypto skeptical, I'm shocked. Like I'm just like, the deeper you look into this, there's always the chance we're human. Maybe we have confirmation bias, but there's a lot of us who see the light, and is passing a lot of logic tests, and most importantly, use cases out in the real world, in the wild, where it's chaos.
Yeah, well, there's 8 billion people on this planet, and I think there's maybe 200 million people involved in crypto, which is 2 to 3%. It's still quite small. So we still forget that most people don't know what crypto is. They think it's a way to make money quick, or they think it's Bitcoin, or they think it's a scam, or they think it's a, what drug dealers use. And it's kind of these all these old adages, which just aren't true. And we start to really see what's happening. Talk to me about DeFi, because it's a big part of this series. Episode 5 is the rise of DeFi. It's why we're here. We have a DeFi Academy. I'm teaching people all over the world DeFi. Why was this something that you locked onto, that you decided to put an entire episode into DeFi? And what did you learn, even from someone who's, newish to the ecosystem?
Yeah. So I latched onto DeFi largely because I saw how broad the implications, how broad the reach would be. I lived for a long time, at the lower end of poverty for America, through my early entrepreneurial years. And so I was living in poor areas surrounded by poor people, people who didn't have, ID because they weren't in the country, legally, ex-convicts, a lot of things, and you would think okay, that sounds kind of sketchy, and there's absolutely there, right? Because poverty attracts crime. It creates an environment where people get so desperate that they don't feel like they can rise in the given system that they were born into, and they feel like their only option for upward mobility is, selling drugs or, robbing people, whatever the thing is, check fraud, fill in the blank. But there's also just good, hardworking people there who, I think about our neighbors who were, illegal immigrants from Mexico. And they were great people. The guy worked his butt off, right? From before the sun was up till after the sun came down. And then he came home and he was like a dad. So, just salt of the earth people. And I saw what DeFi would be able to do for those people. And then I extrapolated from that, and I zoomed out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been to poorer parts of the world just a little bit, right? And even what I saw was just kind of shocking, and to kind of extrapolate that, okay, we've got all these people, they're not all stupid, that's not why they're poor. They're not all lazy, that's not why they're poor. There's a lot of variables, right? But one of the variables is they don't have access to sophisticated banking and financial services. So they're at a disadvantage. And that plays out in both the Western world as well as, what we call the developing world. So when I saw that and I realized okay, I just I was like a flash. I mean, I think a lot of people have this, right? You probably did yourself, where you just oh my gosh, you realize in an instant that this is going to change the world. And for me, whenever I saw that it could have that positive impact, and then I think about the secondary effects, about people who go from just subsisting and barely getting by, and they start to get imaginative, they start to get creative, they start to solve problems for people around them. You get entrepreneurs, you get property ownership. That's something that's sort of a Western phenomenon, right? So all of these things are kind of baked into DeFi. And I mean, I was in a spot where I just left the CEO position, turned the company around and exited. And I could have done anything, but I wanted to do something that was really impactful, something really big, kind of I won't even say legacy play, but because that's very me-centered. I wanted to do something that was bigger than me. And I saw this and I was like, man, I got to tell this story. And then I went out there and I discovered that we're very early. We're so early in this, that many of the things that I just had that vision for, and I know not just me, but a lot of people, we've got to build the infrastructure and the stepping stones to get there. And that is the challenge and the opportunity, right?
Yeah. Wow, you said so much there, Michael. And I know you've, spent a chunk of your life on that low end, of the poverty scale, and it brings a great perspective, because I'm always talking about those 2 billion people in the world that lack what I think is one of the last human rights that's being violated on a daily basis, which is your right to financial freedom. And they don't have basic access to, any service, lending, borrowing, not to mention investing. And we talk about this 2 billion people, and immediately people focus on sub-Saharan Africa, or they focus on places in Asia, but they don't realize that, maybe 5, maybe to 10% of people living in the US of A are people that don't have access to banking services because they don't pass the KYC, they don't pass the AML, maybe they don't have a passport, maybe they don't have a history or a credit history, but they're real people with real jobs, with real families and communities. Many of them work very hard, and yet they're getting exploited a lot of times by these high fee services like Western Union. They have to go around and around to get basic financial services and payday loans and all this stuff, and which just disempowers them and doesn't educate them. And like you said, it actually creates a class of people that are always in a panic red zone moment, which means how can you be creative? How can you give back to your community when you're constantly in a panic state? Imagine you as a human where you're constantly on alert, you're stressed out all the time. And the funny thing is, Michael, these are the same people that we give government checks to during times of crisis that actually hurt them more in the long run by eroding any savings they have left. So it's this terrible cycle. And I'm really glad you brought this up, because it's not just, these people around the world, it's all of us. And I'm also glad the fact you brought up that also the system's not ready. Like, DeFi is amazing, but those people aren't yet necessarily ready to plug into a MetaMask wallet and start getting yield on their USDT, because I struggle teaching Harvard grads and Google employees this stuff in my academy. So again, we still have a ways to go, but you can see there's a glimmer of hope where there's not a gatekeeper anymore that tells people that they can have a relationship with their money. And I'm really glad you brought that up. And I think it's something we need to talk about more. And I'm glad you covered it in the DeFi episode. One of the other things you talk about, Michael, is this sovereign individual concept, or this concept of freedom, which, I didn't see coming. When we talked about this series 6 months ago, if you had told me there would be an episode on freedom and sovereignty, I would have maybe been surprised. Why was that important to tell that story? What did you learn? What do you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I see freedom. I mean, freedom is, it sounds dramatic. Freedom's under attack, right? And it's not like guys with guns gonna, kick your door in and take it. It's being done through bureaucracy, through mandates. It's being done through monetary policy, like you talked about, inflationary monetary policy. It's being done through censorship and propaganda and the fake news. That's probably a trigger word for some people. It's all being done. And honestly, like I said, I was in that place where I just left a position. I was really feeling introspective. I literally locked myself in this office right here for 60 days to decide. And I didn't really take a lot of phone calls. I just worked. And so I was in that position, right, where a lot of people were early last year, especially in America, where we just had the election fiasco, and everybody's 100% convinced that they're right. Everybody's so convinced, and just like me, I'm no different than anybody. I'm no better. I have my confirmation bias, right? I want to believe what I want to believe. I like to go to the sources that tell me what I want to hear. Right. So, but somewhere in the middle of that, there's truth, right? And if we don't have that truth, it's really hard to make wise decisions and, have full context. So that's part of it. But what I saw really with regards to freedom, right, is, you see where there's all these middlemen and gatekeepers who have to give you the thumbs up, right? We could talk about the ex-convict, right? Someone who got busted selling marijuana in their, late teens, early 20s, got tried as an adult, as a felon, gets out, has a hell of a time getting a job, gets into a poverty cycle, feels like they don't have any upward mobility. The only thing they know and have been taught is to go back to that thing. And you've got this repetitive cycle, right? But I think I'm following the wrong tangents.
Yeah, but you were talking about that concept of freedom. And again, the last few years, I think we've all started to really value our freedom.
Yeah.
And you start to see that, like you said, there's information, there's all sorts of ways of taking away some of your freedom, monetary policy, but then ultimately the money itself is one of those big things. I had Dan Held on the show a couple weeks ago, and he's one of the early Bitcoin people, and he said, Brian, if you think about it, no other freedoms matter if you don't have financial freedom. He said, because you can have the freedom of speech, you can have this, but if you're actually controlled by the money, then that's the one that matters most. And it was a pretty bold statement, and I think he might have a point. And when you start to see cryptocurrency and DeFi, you start to see the flaws in the dollar and the monetary system and all of that control. And look, when it comes to freedom, I'll briefly tell our story here. I mean, I had been broadcasting for 9 years on London Real, having conversations in this studio with over nearly 1,000 people, long form, unedited, unscripted, uncensored. We'd put it all on YouTube and all the social platforms. I had a couple million subscribers, over 9,000 videos. And then one day last year on April 6th of 2020, I was doing a stream that strangely enough was the second largest live stream in the world that day. We had 65,000 concurrent viewers. The biggest live stream was Trump that night doing his coronavirus briefing. That's what beat us. And so clearly people really wanted this information. And 30 minutes after the episode, YouTube decided to ban it, delete it, and censor us. And that was the first time that ever happened to me. I'll be honest with you, Michael, I thought it was the weirdos and the crazy people that got censored. I didn't think it was, normal people. And that shows you how I didn't even understand the system. And so my immediate reaction was to re-upload the video and to do a vlog and to start complaining and getting angry. And it started a long fight we had with all the social platforms. It started our fight for free speech. It started my honestly inquisition into what it really means to have freedom of speech and to have the freedom to listen to someone else's opinion. And so we had this whole journey in 2020. We were banned and blocked by every platform, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Dropbox, PayPal. Literally the world was shutting us down. And I was threatening to be deplatformed, which was my entire business, 95% of my business model. And quite honestly, Michael, my whole life was on YouTube. Like my whole life was on there. And that was about to be deleted. So we could talk about, ownership of digital property and NFTs, that'll come later, but it was just, and it was not it was the choice of someone else that had the power.
Exactly.
And so at the
Yeah.
time, I didn't know much about crypto and DeFi, and I didn't even know if there was another option. So we tried to find a route in the old system. We actually did a crowdfunding piece. We created our own digital freedom platform, and we found a way to live stream with the help of some of the people that did the Super Bowl the year before. And we found a way to push on, but it showed me that we really suffer from this lack of freedom of speech and media, and how maybe DeFi and crypto can help us. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I guess you start to see how maybe this new system can empower some of those freedom rights as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I won't belabor the point much longer, but if you think about, the Stasi, one of the things they did was shut down. I mean, they went and they took people's radios. Why would they take people's radios?
This was like the Secret Service in Eastern Germany after World War II, the Stasi, right?
I think it was leading up to World War II.
Up to World War II. Okay. Right.
Yeah. So the precursor to the Nazis, we probably should get that fact checked. But they went and they took the radios because they only wanted them to be able to hear their messaging, right? So that's a classic tactic of authoritarian dictators who are preparing to do something that could be very horrible, but it's probably not going to be above the board. So I'm sitting there, I'm having this kind of frustration like a lot of people, but I'm thinking, what in the world can a guy like me do? I'm a nobody. What could I do? And playing with crypto, and I started looking into the decentralized web, the D web, Web 3, right? Depending on who you're talking to, all of the above. And way back in the day, when I was in the Marine Corps, 20 plus years ago, I did some IT work, and I was familiar with networks, and so I kind of had this, familiarity with things like Metcalfe's law, but I hadn't really tapped into that in a long time, because I got into entrepreneurship and business and learned to do that instead. But when I combined those two things, and I saw what the D-Web was going to do, that it was going to take control out of the hands of Silicon Valley elites, and it was going to return it to the nobodies, right? So that, think about it. You had 65,000 people watching your stream. You have a huge following, a big influencer, and they were ready to cancel you, and they don't care, right? What about everybody else? What if you've only got 100 followers? What if it's just your family and friends and they silence you? It's a problem, and it can lead to really dark places, but cryptocurrency can actually solve that. And it's technically not cryptocurrency. I use the word crypto because that's what people know. I want to introduce people to this world because it's important. Realizing that crypto could do that, again, was another thing I felt like it was just a story that had to be told, right? It's essential for, us to remain free and avoid some of those horrible dystopian nightmares. But if you also think about it from a purely economic standpoint, right? Metcalfe's law is, I'm going to butcher it, but it basically means that the more people are in the network, the value of that network grows exponentially, right? Yeah. So right now, Facebook, Amazon, Google, they are taking full advantage of Metcalfe's law. Their shareholders are benefiting, the founders are benefiting, but the users, while they get to use the product, are not getting any economic benefit, right? So I'm not saying that, the Googles and the Facebooks of the tomorrow world shouldn't, the projects shouldn't make some profit. That's great. But in a world where you've got this, deflation, deflationary technology, where the government can't afford deflation because there's so much debt, I lost my train of thought.
I think you were just talking about this shift from Web 2.0 to 3.0, and it's something we talk about a lot.
So it pushes back to the people, right? I mean, data is like $20 trillion set of assets out there, and it all goes into the hands of a few. Not only do they get the economic benefit, but they also get the control. So crypto offers to hand that back to people, but almost nobody knows.
Yeah, I always use Facebook as a great example. I mean, it's a Web 2.0 phenomenon. It was a great piece of technology that we found that we could reconnect with our friends from high school, and we could realize we don't need to talk to them every week, right? You can upload your videos and photos and connect with friends and family, but the only person that gets rich is Mark Zuckerberg and the equity holders, and you give them all of your information, and it's digital colonialism. They sell it back to you, and then sometimes they take it away from you. And that's Web 2.0. Web 3.0 is where you can own part of the network. You can transfer that value peer-to-peer. You can own your information. And when you see crypto, you start to think, wow, maybe we could do this in all ways. And if you look at Amazon, Google, Facebook, they all take 30 to 40 to 50% of the profits for themselves. And in a Web 3.0 world, that doesn't have to happen. So it's a great way to look at this whole shift and to also think about it from a freedom perspective. I know we have a clip that we're going to play here as well that goes into the censorship. And if people want to watch or start watching this documentary series, they can go to londonreal.tv/uncensored and start watching it for free right now. Michael, I'm going to play this short clip talking a little about censorship, and then we're going to come back and go a little deeper on a couple of the other pieces.
So the DeFi market has gone from 0 to 100 billion in roughly a year. I'd say that's pretty big and pretty fast. The sort of thing that could go to 500 billion or $1 trillion in another year. As people start realizing that you don't need to keep your money in a bank and you're better off putting it in this new parallel sort of financial system.
When you think about our ability to use PayPal to send instant payments to our friends and family, and other tech stacks that enable that sort of thing. DeFi is doing a similar sort of thing, or crypto enables that instant transfer and payment, cross-border or otherwise. But the difference is that in DeFi there is no PayPal, and so I think that the tech that we're coming to market with is going to change the way that the banking industry interfaces with retail consumers and users. It's already happening.
At the end of the day, this DeFi is absolutely unstoppable, and it's going to happen in one form or another, and it will take some market share from banks.
A lot of these people who are investing in crypto are now starting to figure out, I don't just have to hold it in my investing account, I can actually lend it. And they are starting to function in a way as their own bank, where they're now earning returns on their crypto because other people, they want crypto and they will literally borrow it from you.
The most exciting thing in decentralized finance by far, and the thing that pulled me into this market, was watching the borrowing and lending protocols explode in what's now known as the DeFi summer of 2020. That single event will go down in history as probably the greatest thing that ever happened to DeFi.
Everybody has the ability to authenticate themselves and have access to a global financial system and information system that didn't exist before, which I know when I got my hands on the internet in '95, changed my world, just expanded my world so much. So I imagine that is taking place for everybody else too.
Let's say you have $10,000, you convert them into USDT, USDC, you put those money into the DeFi protocols, Aave, Wire, or whatever, you can earn upwards to 10%, 15%, 20%, depending what kind of risk level you can tolerate.
It is absolutely mind-boggling that a technology has emerged that can actually transform society in multiple dimensions in a way that has never been possible since the emergence of mankind.
And so I'm back with Michael. Michael, there's probably too much to talk about today, so I'm just going to pick and choose, some of the things that you went deep on. Obviously, we've talked about DeFi, we've talked about freedom and censorship. Talk to me about the metaverse, NFTs, because this is what's getting everyone's attention. And I'll tell you a really quick story. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and if you ever dealt with teenagers, there's nothing easy about that situation. And I became the coolest dad in the world for about a week when I gave my daughter an NFT. Now, nice. Michael, I could have given her a Porsche and I wouldn't have been as cool. But when I sent her an NFT on her MetaMask wallet, by the way, that I set up for her after she was a guest on this show, and she now has crypto. She now owns an asset at 17 years old. I'm sure you and I didn't own assets when we were 17.
No.
And now she has the NFT, and so many people are captivated by these currently low-level pieces of art that are being expressed as NFTs. What did you discover about this phenomenon from you talking to the experts? How do you start having this conversation with people?
Yeah, so I start probably with the fact that the current use of NFTs is not where it all stops, right? This is just what gets traction. So one of the cool things about the intersection of NFTs, gaming, and the metaverse is that this is a really low-key way for people to engage with the world of crypto. It's as much fun as anything.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.